Hello, it's Andy here again. Welcome back to the fourth part in our Serenity in the Trenches series. Today we're asking a big question. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you change about the world right now? So this is an interesting question for a gut reaction. You know, some people struggle with the idea of waving a magic wand. You know, it's not how change happens, and it can remind them of all the stuff that they wish was different, but, you know, they kind of experience this sense of powerlessness within that. But I find it a really helpful place to start when it comes to creating a kind of connection to my vision. You know, it's not actually about changing the thing, but more recognizing what matters to you, the thing that, you know, you would want to change. You know, it's one of the one piece in the kind of jigsaw of identifying what might be described as, you know, our passion or whatever. You know, this is a word that is used a lot. We hear that passion is meant to be discovered or followed or found or whatever. But passion's not hiding. You know, it's not awaiting us to unearth it. Instead, we kind of piece it together bit by bit as we understand the things that that break our heart, the struggles we would love to change, the way things are that we would love to see be different, and that kind of stuff. And for some people, this might seem like a kind of dauntingly hopeless endeavor, reminding them of what is wrong. But that's not the value of this question, certainly for me. And when I've been getting the responses back as well, it's not the value that have come from that. The value comes from allowing ourselves to step outside of the present reality, to give ourselves permission to admit the stuff that we wish was different. And from there, we can begin the work of identifying the very real ways that we can actually put that energy into practice. Boom perfectly sums up the struggle for sensitive people. You know, we see the grey, the nuance, the innate contradictions within the world. We live in this liminal space between getting value from and seeing the damage caused by our favourite things.
But the problem is that I want to change so many things about the world, but I don't have a proper alternative solution for it necessarily. So, you know, for example, capitalism. You know, I love capitalism. It's giving me a lot of beautiful things like this MacBook Air that I'm recording this video on. And so, of course, I love capitalism in one way, but another way, all of those species that are being destroyed, all the rainforests that are being destroyed.
Now I feel this contradiction deep inside of me. The grey area is the nuance. I appreciate the byproducts of the things in the world I know need to change. And I don't have the solution. I think this is a really interesting thought to sit with and to allow ourselves to actually feel, to entertain. Because with our tendency toward all or nothing thinking, we are encouraged often to believe that we can't hold conflicting ideas like these at the same time. But I want to encourage and challenge you to do just that. You don't need to label yourself or put yourself into a box. You don't need to be this or that. We do spend energy on this stuff, and there is something beautiful about bringing our care and concern for the world into a place where we lay it out. For Cameron, it's found in the way we interact with people and ideas that transcend the normalized structures and systems that we've built this increasingly fragile reality upon.
I think there's like four main things right now. I narrowed it down. Like, I would get rid of gender socialization and sexism. I would get rid of racism, systemic racism. I would make sure that every person who can get pregnant has affordable and easy access to abortion. And I would make sure that the United States, where I live, prioritizes climate change and is actively trying to do our part systemically to help be more environmentally friendly.
There's also a concern for the environment, but with a refreshing angle.
You know, the earth will go on without us, but we may not make it as humans, right? So it's not so much that we're protecting the earth, but we're protecting humans being on this earth, right? And I do think that all those issues I just mentioned are connected.
Josie talks about the grief and worry of our environment.
The environment is an overwhelming source of grief and worry for me, but I don't think waving a magic wand would solve anything there. The problem is more fundamental than a one-time flash of change. It's about how we all live. So instead, I think one thing I would change would be to make our leaders scientists, psychologists, creatives, and artists, engineers, sociologists, and teachers who are driven by a desire to solve problems, not to make money or gain power. I want our world's best thinkers and creators in charge, not our best business people or our most privileged. I'd also heavily tax the super wealthy. I firmly believe that globally distributing wealth would be a great way to invest in the things that will help solve many of the world's big issues.
Jim Woods underpins this point, saying he would change our fixation on money as the controller and measurer of things. As we think about our dreams, our creative projects, and the stories that we're living, money is a massive source of what we believe about the world.
I think I would change the fixation on money, because that's what's holding so many people back. It's like, ooh, I'm making this much, I can't pursue my dream because I need this much money. I think it's the money. I think I would wave it a wand and be like, look, if you take money out of the equation and you know you're not going to like starve to death and live outdoors, what do you do then? Like, that would be amazing. Wave that wand, because I think the money hang up is a lot of the problem. And I'll just full disclosure, I make less now than I did like 5 years ago. But it's about quality of life for me, not so much just how much money I make. I live like I'm making 10 times what I was making 5 years ago. So it's very much a funny dynamic there.
So Jim is spot on here. There are many reasons money can cause problems, and we consistently see it stop us from being all that we are capable of being. We become tethered to it in unhelpful ways, and when it gets in the way of us living our values, whether that's because we have too much or we believe we have too little, we've given too much power to it. Only we can know when this has become the case for us personally.
I would get rid of the idea that the ends justify the means. I think that so much damage is done in the cause of that belief, and that the world would just be a more authentic place with much more integrity if we started to embrace the idea that actually the way that we do something is what creates the outcome.
I really feel what Alice is saying here. It reminds me of the message explored in the documentary Chasing Great, which follows the All Blacks captain Richie McCaw as he led his team to back-to-back Rugby World Cup wins earlier in this decade. One of the main threads throughout the movie is, what does it mean to be great? What does that word mean? And it soon becomes clear that being a great All Black is about more than just winning things. It's the manner in which you do it. It's the character, the spirit, the integrity with which you engage in the game. And in this sense, the end doesn't justify the means. If the end is to win, that is. If you win in the wrong way, the victory is empty. If you've not left the world, the game, the people watching truly better off. This relates to a lot of what we see in the political world right now. Tracy Cooper says, at this moment, it would be enabling people to think rationally and creatively so they could distinguish between would-be dictators and charlatans who use them to achieve selfish goals for their own benefit. If we could raise the level at which people are able to weigh the information they take in and do so with minds that are open and logical, we could empower people to make better choices and subscribe to less radical positions that lead to so much animosity in our current world. Yeah, we've lost perspective. We're ceding power to those who shout the loudest, who carry selfish ambition, not the good of the hive in their hearts. And Nancy's heart carries a beautiful message that sits with what Tracy says as well. I would remove all cruelty, human to human, human to animal. I would eliminate violence of all kinds driven by politics, entitlement, domination, racism, culture, religion, gender, species, and so on. I would love to end the suffering that is endemic on this earth. This is the suffering that is man-made, the kind of suffering that we inflict upon the universe, which again so often boils back down to ignorance and fear. Fear is something being manufactured and used. Another thing for which there is an appetite to change. You know, Jacqueline Strickland again. She'd return a sense of pride and integrity and compassion and democracy to her home country, the United States. This is something that I'm sure people from many different communities around the world would share as well. You know, here in the UK, it's definitely a wish. No matter where you land in your political ideology or leanings, we're seeing a great void in these basic measures of a civilized society. For me, this word pride, it's important. I love that Jacqueline used it because pride comes with reason. Pride in our country has everything to do with the great example, the work, the values that we set. The word's been hijacked by those who want to tribalize under the idolized banner of nationalism. It's not about what the nation or the flag represents as a positive, valuable entity. The pride starts and ends with a narrowly defined sense of what the identity is. And this knits together with fear of the other, binary thinking, surface level identity judgments.
If I could wave a magic wand and change one thing in the world today, I think it would be to remove the concept that selfishness is a good idea. It would eradicate the world of so much harm, so much abuse, and so much need for people to experience fear and live hyper-vigilant lives, and one in which, you know, we have to add layer after layer of security on our lives just because other people don't have respect for another individual's existence or their stuff. So that's what I'd do. I'd remove the idea that selfishness is good.
I love that these themes come up over and over. And I think this speaks volumes about the heart of people, especially sensitive types right now. We're through with those messages of self-interest and rampant individualism. There's an appetite for connection and community. We've been driven apart by fear, and we're ready to come back to the world from a different place. Come back together out of love.
This one is easy. I would change the amount of fear I see out in the world. I see it in the news, I see it online, I see it in social media. Everyone's afraid. Everyone's afraid of events they think are coming, like climate change or political events. But people are really also afraid of each other. People seem to be afraid of people who have different opinions, differing views, different experiences, different perspectives. There's not so much of an open dialogue. People are really afraid to ask honest questions, it seems like, anymore, because they don't want to be shamed or shunned online or in their friend circles in real life. I would change that. I would change that amount of fear. I think it's really important to have an open dialogue. I think it's really important to be able to ask honest questions if it comes from a place of good intent.
Man, thanks, Lauren. I couldn't agree more. Our culture of public shaming is really causing us to falter right now. It creates roadblocks for all of us. This creates fear of honesty, fear of vulnerability, fear of being real, fear of putting our head above the parapet. And this just drives us further and further apart.
Gosh, there's so much. And we're all feeling, I think no matter where you fall on any spectrum of beliefs or ideologies or how you vote or what you are an advocate for, it doesn't matter if things are going in your direction or not. It's still stressful. There's still a lot of change and a lot of churn. And so we're all feeling that. And in my experience, one of the things that gives us the most stress in our lives is conversations that we're not having. I've heard over and over and over again over the past 3 years about how important conversations are to our personal journeys as well as our collective journeys as a culture and as a world, as planet Earth. And so if I can wave a magic wand, I would say that people start to be willing to have conversations that they're not having, that they enter into those conversations with the intention of understanding and listening. Part of what's so important about those conversations is releasing that need to be right and to be able to just look across the table and hear that person and see them as a fellow human being, recognize that we are interdependent, we are interconnected, and that by, fiercely standing by what we believe is right, that really gets in the way of us connecting in a meaningful way with our fellow human beings. Just because you listen to someone doesn't mean that you agree with them. It simply means you're listening. And trying to understand them doesn't mean that you are inviting them to change your mind. But I would also encourage you to be open to influence. You might find that something about what you thought was true gets changed in the course of that interaction. And it might end up that the person that you're talking to ends up having a shift or a change. The important thing is to be open to the outcome, not attached, to be open to listening, to being open to influence, and releasing attachment to being right, releasing attachment to changing their mind or persuading them, and to just have that conversation that really needs to be had, and to come away from it, with a richer understanding of yourself, of your fellow human beings, and what you can bring to the conversation.
I love this, Beth. Thank you. We need to reassess our understanding of empathy and compassion, how to hold ideas and views and opinions that we don't agree with in such a way that we don't create cocoons and bubbles around ourselves. To listen to another person in such a way that they feel seen on a human-to-human level. In many ways, the fact that we dehumanize one another is why we've got to this place in the first place. If we can release our attachment to being right, release our attachment to the shaming of other people, release our need to get even, to set an example of how to be wrong, and begin to see the world through eyes of compassion, we might actually begin to see the emergence of a better kind of contagion spreading through the world.
Well, being a comedian and being sensitive too, I actually find it's difficult to navigate this kind of people getting offended so easily now. And in a way, it's given us a lot of progress. It's provided space for progress. And I get all that. But sometimes it just makes me feel anxious when I read these articles that are meant to stir outrage. And, we end up getting this outrage fatigue, or at least I do. And I'm like, it's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. I know what the intention behind what these people's actions were. I'm not saying it's right, but I wish that people could have a more nuanced view of things instead of so many people just looking for drama, looking for things to get offended by. So that's one thing I would change.
So this emphasizes one of the big fears that I have as well. This the good people will give up sharing their voices with the world for fear of saying something that might get taken wrong, or misunderstood or whatever. It's a scary time to speak out. And for sensitive types, they're the voices that we need now more than ever. It's not particularly appealing to share our message, to share our creativity, or express our voice with the world. There's not a lot that kind of is appealing about it. Not a lot that says, that's a good idea. And this desire for a change in the way that we engage with one another is strong. For Neil, it is a focus on the word that I just used a minute ago, compassion. More of that in everything.
I try not to be too selfish, I think. The temptation obviously would be to, grant myself all kinds of wishes. But I think what would have the biggest impact? I think probably more compassion. If you could just put more compassion into I count myself amongst this. I could be more compassionate. I think all of us could stand to be more compassionate, more able to understand the world from other perspectives, to really get what people in different situations are feeling and why. It would solve a lot of our political problems, which would solve a lot of the systemic problems, which would solve a lot of the individual problems. A lot of the problems we have in our lives are from the society that we live in, and the kind of quite cruel way in which a lot of it is fashioned, and the way in which we need to spend so much of our time on things that aren't particularly motivating or soul restoring, whatever the opposite of soul crushing is. So more compassion would definitely be a start, although I don't think any one thing solves all of our problems, but that wouldn't hurt.
Sarah Santacroce brings leadership into focus as well, the example being set to us by those at the top. What if it was the power of love and not the love of power that sat at the heart of things? Wow, what a change that would make.
I don't believe in magic wands, first of all. Again, I'm just so grounded that magic is a bit far-fetched for me. But if I could change one thing, I think personally, I would say, yeah, let's work on marketing, and marketing would need a paradigm change, blah, blah, blah. But if I thought about it for a bit, and I think the one thing that needs change right now is much higher up, and it has to do with politics. So if I could change one thing, then I would say we need other leaders that are not in this paradigm of power, but in the paradigm of love, because it's all top to bottom, right? This energy of anxiety and diversity and fear comes from the top. And unfortunately, some of the leaders that we have now, they're feeding that kind of paradigm. They're feeding that kind of anxiety. So yeah, if I could change one thing, I would change some of the leaders so that we're going back to this paradigm of love and not power and fear.
So when control and fear are the driving forces in our lives, great anxiety is created. Anxiety is essentially energy directed nowhere and everywhere. It's a dangerous fuel in the engine of a society because it leads us to some really destructive patterns of behavior and ways of thinking as a collective. And there's a real desire for an empowering change in the hearts of people. For Leah, it comes down to embracing differences within the context of community, and that desire to bring more community back into our everyday lives.
I would figure out a way to make community a part of, embed it more fully into how we do things. I think a lot of the reason why so many people feel overwhelmed and they feel like everything is so dark and miserable, when I don't think that's the reality. I think most people are reasonable human beings who are just doing the best they can. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that we're all so siloed. We don't have opportunities to connect with other human beings in a way that feels nourishing and allows us to both connect with people and also kind of back off when we need to recharge in solitude. And I don't know what that would entail, but I can say that I've got neighbors nearby me that are wildly different in terms of their political affiliation, but we get along great. Like, she's from Texas and I'm from Oregon, from California, and we both moved to Oregon. So we've got a lot of differences in opinion, but at the end of the day, we have a blast when we hang out together. And whoever you vote for and whatever your thoughts and opinions are, I think at the end of the day, we all want a roof over our head. We all want safety and harmony for our family. We want a thriving life. And so if we can figure out ways to connect on that, that would be really awesome. And so I think some of the best ways that I've found to bridge the perceived gaps that we have and shift my thinking from, oh my God, the world is going to end, to no, we're doing okay, is when I get opportunities to meet with people, real people, live, and have a conversation with them. So if I could change something about the world, I would make it easier to connect and have community in a way that doesn't feel overbearing, but feels really easy to engage. And I don't know what that would look like exactly, but I know a lot of people are super hungry for community and feeling like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Love it. And for Tracy Gillett, it's how people see themselves. We'd love to see every introvert and highly sensitive person feel good about themselves, to embrace who they are, to feel accepted as they are.
Everybody out there who's introverted, highly sensitive, stopped feeling bad about themselves. And then the world embraced that too. Can you imagine what our world would be like if people didn't feel bad about their quietness, if people didn't feel bad about being more sensitive, and especially around sensitivity, that our emotions are so important. They tell us things are going well. They tell us things aren't going well. And as you know, if you're more sensitive, we get that message really loud, and how important that is. When we're told we're not supposed to be like that, of course, we try to hide our emotions, shut them down, not feel them. And such a loss when we do that, loss for ourselves and loss for the world, essentially, because there's so much wisdom in our emotions. And Yeah, and I think in that highly sensitive part and introversion part too, from what I see is that intuition is often high in us as well. And so if we're shutting all of that down, there's a negative impact on the world, on us. So that's what I would do with my magic wand. I would erase that feeling of feeling less than, because we're introverted and more sensitive.
And Sarah Kunn agrees. The stigma around being quiet. She wants to see a world where people know it's okay to be different from what is deemed to be the right way, the acceptable way, the normal way of being, of showing up in the world.
If I had a magic wand and I could change something, I would change the stigma around being quiet. I have been quiet for my whole life. I used to hide behind my mom and my older sister when I was little. As I've gotten a bit older, I've finally found my voice. I'm starting to feel like it's okay to be different from what is acceptable. I'm not a work in groups type of person, and that's okay. I don't need to be the life of the party or to carry on the conversation. It's okay for me to just be me, the awkward, quiet girl who listens to most of the conversation in groups, but is more comfortable one-on-one. I'm okay with that.
And Tula shares a beautiful thought as well.
I'd wish childlike curiosity and acceptance for all kinds of ideas and differences for everyone. To see those as assets to create, to combine, to realize new things. Some kind of gentle wandering, sharing and supporting instead of dividing and destroying or taking sides. And remember good manners. Behave. Be gentle to others and to yourself too.
Jacob says he would change the message inside of everybody.
You know, I feel like the main thing that I would change would be if I could just send everyone back to themselves inside with the questions, what would I love? What brings me joy? If I could send everyone back and install those questions as reflexive questions whenever they're faced with a challenge or, you know, a crossroads in life, I know that the world as we know it would begin to correct itself very quickly. Because when someone is in their joy, when someone is creating even a little bit, when they're viewing their life as their creation, they don't take more than they need. They don't hurt other people. They don't, get greedy. They stay in the place of feeling on purpose, because in my lexicon, joy and purpose and life and love, those are all, and creativity, those are all the same. Those are all synonyms for each other.
Absolutely love this. And I love receiving all of these responses because none of them feel outlandish. None feel out of reach. In fact, they're really solid, positive visions for what we're capable of as humans. And I hope that this has been a hope-filled session for you, as it has been for me putting it together. Not one where we're dwelling on the gap and thinking, oh man, we've got such a long way to go. But one where it feels like, actually, yes, there's stuff missing. Yes, there is a big gap between where we are and where we could be. But we can feel connected to this because there are so many people who have a heart for change, for compassion, for a better way of doing things. And those who see you as you are, giving permission to be yourself in all your unique creative beauty, because that's really what is going to ultimately change the world from the inside out. More people who are showing up and doing what they feel like they're here to do, with courage, with community, with support, with that sense of, actually, it's not just me. I'm not on my own doing this. So I'll throw this question back at you. What would you change about the world right now if you had a magic wand? I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, andy@andymort.com, or get in touch via social media. It'd be really cool to kind of get your thoughts on this as well.